Drive away your worries and cares at this drive-in theater, where you will see the finest motion pictures of all time, soon to be released. Drama, comedy, adventure, excitement, something for everyone.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Because the Eternals has an incredibly complicated plot, and I don't want us to spend 20 minutes.
I don't want us to spend 20 minutes in the weeds on this one.
So speaking of that, do we have a lot of news today?
We do have some news. So that's it? We're in now?
We're in now, yeah.
We're doing a show now.
I'm starting episodes now mid-word, not even mid-sentence.
Yep. Thankfully, I wasn't sneezing or coughing.
So welcome. Hi.
Yes, welcome once again. I feel Jim and I just had this discussion beforehand. It feels like we have not done this in a month. This may have been the longest week ever. And according to Christina, it sounds like it may have been actually the longest week for you. But we're all here now. And we watched some movies, did we not? We did.
More than our fair share in some cases.
Yeah, we doubled down this week.
I'm not even counting doubling down. I'm counting one particular movie here as more than our fair share.
I will tell you, my wife took one for the team and she went to the theater with me to go see
Wow.
which is what we're actually going to be speaking about. And part of it was the fact that it was an opening weekend. So, and we went like 7:00 on a Monday, which is unheard of. But I feel like it's been a month since I saw this movie.
If anybody's on pins and needles wondering what movie it is that we're talking about, it is Eternals. We are covering another Marvel Studios movie this week.
Yes. And it feels like eternity since I've seen it. But we'll get there because we have Eternals and then we are pairing it up with what?
This is your brainchild.
Oh, it was my brainchild.
And this is it amazes me each and every week how these movies somehow manage to tie in as well as they do.
Somehow. See, it's like this little id in the back of your head. Because last week with the little Shop of Horrors, I'm watching Little Shop of Horrors and I'm like, this is brilliant. These movies. So if you didn't listen to that episode, go back and listen to it because I enjoyed immensely those two viewings. We are pairing this up with the 1981 classic Clash of the Titans. So we're going to get into some stop motion goodness, but let's get through some news and then we'll hit our review. First and foremost, we have to announce that Dean Stockwell has died. He was 85, so
I know. But I loved him in Marriage to the Mob. That's like one of my favorite movies.
The guy has an acting career 70 years.
Yeah,
so he's been acting since the age of 15.
He's not one of these actors that you haven't seen in eons, hearing that he's passed. He's been working regularly. And Battlestar Galactica, a huge part of Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, obviously, most people probably know him from the 80s Quantum Leap. He was Al, right? Wasn't he like AI? He was like an artificial intelligent thing. Am I talking to the wrong audience here?
I did not watch that TV show.
I did not either.
I never did either, to be honest with you. But I do believe if that is correct, that he was like part of the computer that Sam was using to jump to and fro. So yeah, unfortunately, 200 plus credits to this guy's acting career. Oscar and Emmy nominated. 85, he's passed away. Let's bring this up. We won't get into the weeds on this one, but the set of Rust is being taken down. The lamp operator and pipe rigger, this guy Jason Miller, was disassembling the set and was bitten by a brown recluse spider and now may lose his arm.
Oh my gosh.
So is this set cursed? Like,
Yeah.
this is just like that's salt on the wound right there. That is horrible.
How random is something like that?
As a kid, we were always told to be very wary of rattlesnakes, though, because you could lose limbs if you get bit,
Oh,
but
Wow,
not a
and-
spider.
In upstate New York, where my dad always told me to look out for copperheads, not,
Yeah.
you know.
this may explain all the amputees I see here in upstate New York.
It's rampant. So this is unfortunate. I don't have any more information other than the fact that he is being treated. So hopefully they got it in time. He knew what happened and that he makes a full recovery with both limbs intact. So it's just crazy though. I read that headline. I'm just like, wow, this is, you can't make this stuff up.
This movie, just the stigma around it would have been just unbelievable. Nobody would have been watching this for the movie itself. You know, The Crow is what we were talking about when we first broke this story, and how this, you know, echoes what happened back in 1992, 93, whenever The Crow was actually being filmed. It's unbelievable to me that The Crow kind of transcended that and is such a classic now. Of course it's there, but when I see The Crow, I don't necessarily think of the tragedy, just because, you know, I love that movie so much.
Yes, and hopefully it's the last. It looks like there's already some studios that are stepping in and making changes.
Yeah, like I mentioned the week that we talked about the Rust tragedy, like Mayor of Easttown, all the gunshots are special effects. They did not have, you know, weapons that could carry live rounds on set.
Right.
And I think that if you have that technology, you should use it. I don't think you should be putting anybody in jeopardy.
No, I think Dwayne Johnson, his production company, said that they're going all over to these plastic guns. And you know, I've heard the argument, and people are like, well, you know, plastic guns up close, you can tell that they're not real and they don't fire. But that's for a prop department to make a revolver, a fake revolver, still like your hammer pulls back and I don't even know what the hell it's called, rotates. All the guns in Star Wars were fake. Nobody once complained about them. I think the only problem you have to worry about is these guys actually going around and yelling bang when they pull the trigger, or if it's laser pew pew. But anyways, we're moving on. Speaking of Star Wars, Hollywood Reporter is claiming that Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron, which is one of the few Star Wars movies that was announced that we were all excited about, has been taken off the planned schedule. So it looks like it's due to her scheduling, though, not necessarily anything to do with the movie itself. Because I will tell you, you know, just that little trailer of her, that little tease of her talking about, you know, growing up as an Air Force brat and her father was a pilot. She basically puts on the jumpsuit and then walks to a full X-Wing. Like to me, I'm like, I'm on board. Like, that's it. But apparently she's Wonder Woman 3 and Cleopatra. Do you know about this? That she's filming Cleopatra with Gal Gadot?
Yes, I did know about this.
Yeah, so that's very exciting. So unfortunately that has been it's just impossible to manage all of these commitments, and so that has been pushed back. And maybe that's a good thing. Who knows? Peter Jackson has sold Weta Digital.
Wow.
It's going over the Unity Software has purchased this for $1.625 billion. They've acquired the entire suite, all the engineers, 275 engineers, the entire team. And it looks like they're going to turn this around and offer this software up almost like a Photoshop type of pay service creative suite, which is interesting. So, you know,
it's funny that you mention this, because the name Weta is so prevalent. If you watch those extended cuts of all the Lord of the Rings and then go into the appendices, as they call them, which you know equals bonus features, and there's hours and hours of bonus features on each one of these extended cuts, and the word Weta is said so many times, like it is, and everybody is of course from New Zealand, so they all say it Weta like that. Weta. So that's how I pronounce it in my head, is the New Zealand way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think behind ILM, these guys are like the premier special effects. Look at the stuff they did for the Lord of the Rings, speaking of which. So that's interesting. So eventually you'll be able to just buy this off the shelf and be able to do the same thing. There's all these little home studios, these guys, you know, these little directors that don't have big budgets or whatever, still crank this stuff out. I was just watching last night the movies that made us on Netflix, Jurassic Park, the whole revolution that was, and how up against it, you know, because they wanted to do it stop motion. And these guys that were doing a computer generator, like, we can do this. We can make this happen.
Yeah.
And nobody believed them whatsoever. And that literally overnight, like, changed the entire industry. So that's it. That's pretty much all the news I have. If anybody else has
All
something.
right. No.
No?
So
Then I
let's
guess
get
not.
into it. Let's get into it. Eternals. I think right out of the gate, I'm going to have to say, I usually will come on here, and when we talk about an MCU movie, I'll say, "Oh, this was my favorite out of all of them."
Yes,
every time I see a new
every
one.
time you're like, every time I think I have a favorite, then this
Eternals. If we were to do another episode ranking Marvel, this would be on the bottom. This would be dead last on my Marvel listing. I am sorry to say.
Wow. That's
So-
really, we just skip the plot and we just go right down.
Well, I mean, part of the problem here, this would not be dead last on my list only because there's a lot of actors I really like that are in this, and it did have a few moments that sort of saved this film for me. But the problem is they're trying to do a lot of heavy lifting in this movie. They're trying to set up basically like phase 4.
Yeah.
they're trying to establish a whole history of these characters.
Yes.
As well as a current conflict, as well as the future. I mean, this is a lot to put on one movie, and it's unfortunate because I think there's probably a good movie in here.
I agree. It's too much to take. Even with, they have an opening crawl, which you don't normally see. I don't even know if you've ever seen one in an MCU movie. So I'm reading this. I'm like, is this like a quiz? Am I supposed to remember these names? Because I don't want to do the heavy lifting so soon into this film. Maybe they were trying to go for an epic kind of feel right off the bat. But you've got Celestials that invent Eternals, that also invent deviants, and there's this secret war going on for thousands of years across galaxies. And so you're thinking they're introducing this huge backstory now into the current MCU. And as Christina's just saying, you have a sense that this is setting up the phase 4, but at the same time doesn't give you any indication how it could tie into what you've already seen. They make pains to say, oh, we've never interfered in human conflict before because we've been told by our bosses, the Celestials that made us, we can only fight these deviants. So we've stayed out of human history because they need to evolve on their own. And then the question comes up, the movie asks, well, why didn't we help with the battle against Thanos? Or why didn't we stop world wars? Well, because the Celestials say that we can't. So this whole huge thing is going on in the background throughout all of our beloved MCU movies. And it's never intertwined before. It's just kind of thrown in now. Oh, this is here now too. So
Right.
I felt very much that was like shoehorned into what we already know.
And that's the thing, like I said, like they're trying to establish like this gigantic mythology beyond Earth, basically. And you can see like where the films are trending in that direction, and even some of the projects that are coming out in the future, we're starting to get some pretty deep cuts now, particularly in the post-credit scene. These are characters that nobody's ever heard of. Okay.
No.
No.
And I will say that whole Dane Whitman thing was like, you don't need to walk out of a theater and have to explain to someone you just watch this 3-hour movie with and explain why that character is semi-important or what that sword was.
I had to Google it myself. I never cared about Black Knight or Dane Whitman.
Well,
I didn't know what was going on.
I mean, my son knew who it was, but
Yeah.
not because he had read the comic, but because he has a Marvel character encyclopedia, and he immediately recognized the character from his Marvel character encyclopedia. But if you are not a 15-year-old kid who sits around reading character encyclopedias
Or collect comic books, and people are pushing the first appearance of Black Knight because this character is going to show up in this movie.
The unfortunate thing is that, for this movie at least, is the actor who plays Black Knight, I just forgot his name.
Kit Harington.
Yeah,
Kit Harington,
Yeah.
who I think is
Jon Snow.
I never watched Game of Thrones. I know he was on that show, but I think he's so gorgeous, but he's also he's so funny. Like he's got such a great sense of humor. Like the scenes where he's in really light up. He's great with Gemma Chan. I was like, why isn't he in this movie?
That's what I felt, because I didn't know the Black Knight reveal was coming. So I'm like, he's wasted in this.
Yeah. To that end, like the other characters just don't hold the screen. The Icarus and Cersei thing, like I never once believed that they were truly in love with each other. It was just a romance of convenience.
And the feeling that you get is so oppressive during this. There's no humor except when Kingo comes on screen.
It takes itself very seriously.
There is that. I mean, at least, yes, Kumail Nanjiani is amazing.
Yeah, that was he was fun to watch.
Now he is really against type because, you know, as we know, he is a comedian. So that is his bread and butter, is comedy. So I am so glad that he was in this to lighten the movie. He is the highlight of the movie for me, is Kingo.
Yes. And his assistant.
Yes. His valet.
Yeah, that was a joke to the whole thing. I mean, I liked Sprite. All I kept thinking was she was the little girl from Waterworld.
I liked individual characters. Like I liked Faustus and I liked Gilgamesh, Don Lee. I hope you guys recognized him.
Yeah, of course.
He is the husband of the pregnant woman in Train to Busan. And Gemma Chan, I love her. She's one of my favorite actresses. She plays Minerva in Captain Marvel, and she's Astrid in Crazy Rich Asians. She's the voice of Namari in Raya and the Last Dragon. She's a great actress. She has a great sense of humor, which you actually see in her character in Minerva and Captain Marvel. So again, it's just sort of unfortunate that some of these actors didn't get to play a little more broadly, but she has to play this very serious character who's literally carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. And then that said, they have this very complicated plot and all these things they're trying to lay in. And then there's a bunch of stuff somehow they still left on the floor. Like when she turns the deviant into a tree, which I was sure was somehow going to play into.
Oh yeah, did she tell you about the time she turned that thing into a tree?
Because everybody was acting like this was the most amazing thing they've ever seen her do.
Yeah, and I'm like, how could they, like, they have all this plot here. How could they leave this major plot element just hanging out there?
Well, she did, to be fair, she did pretty much the same thing at the end with the Celestial. Although not a tree, but she turned it into stone.
Except that she says she did it because she actually used the power of the Celestial itself. It wasn't her power.
And the Unimind was was in play here. So again,
the Unimind, I liked him a lot in the Transformers movie.
There's so much going on here. And not even counting Celestials and Uniminds and bracelets and everything else that gets thrown at you. The movie has to focus on pretty much what amounts to a football team of cast members. So you never really focus on any more than one for a great deal of time. It's, switching from this perspective to this perspective to this perspective. It's just like too much.
They're trying to do so much in this film.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I will say I saw this 7:00 on a Monday and I fell asleep a couple times. I fought to stay awake watching this. And now go back last week, I dragged my ass into the theater at 10:00 at night on a Friday and I'm completely absorbed in Last Night of Soho. Mm-hmm. This could not, I'm completely indifferent to it. I was very disappointed in it. I just I don't care. It's been a full week and I don't think I've thought twice about it.
It's very unfortunate because again, I feel like this is a really good cast that has a lot of potential.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
But they're trying to do so much in this film. And it really just bit off more than it could chew. Yeah. And it's just unfortunate because I feel that this is a film that's going to end up setting up a bunch of stuff down the line. Yeah. And if people don't go see this movie, then later on they're going to be like, wait, what are you?
What's a Celestial? What is
if you're not invested, the Celestials were the best part of this whole thing. They were very well realized. I thought that
visually, yes, but the idea of them I thought was pretty ridiculous, though.
Well, I mean that goes to the source material. So, we get into the Jack Kirby, it's his fault. I will give these guys credit though. 7,000 years and not a single one of them decided to change their hair.
I know Sprite was rocking that early
that's a
Ziggy
way to rock
Stardust.
that. Yeah, Druid had that Mo Howard thing going on. But
The other thing I kept thinking throughout the film, now I only saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 one time because Guardians of the Galaxy are actually some of my personal least favorite Marvel films. I fundamentally do not care about those films or those people. But the whole time I'm like, wasn't Ego a Celestial? And then my
yeah,
husband and son did confirm for me after
yes,
the film that Ego was a Celestial. So now my question
yeah.
is, how
Why?
come Ego looks like Kurt Russell and the rest of them
Right.
are these giant
These giant
robots.
robots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the quibbles of the fact that, you know, they didn't get involved in the Thanos thing is kind of silly, because in the comic books, Thanos is part deviant. So they completely negated that. But these deviants, they look like rejects from Avatar. They weren't even compelling bad guys.
The whole fact that they did not get involved in human conflict goes against the very reveal of what the Celestials' true purpose is, to kind of farm humanity until there's enough of them in order to birth a new Celestial. So why wouldn't you get involved in the Thanos
Right, stop
thing?
the war so that they don't kill each other off.
Because they said that the Thanos snap would have prevented the birth, the emerging, for I don't know how many years. So why wouldn't they get involved to stop the snap so they could birth the Celestial? So it just didn't, the mythos that they were building didn't make sense.
Yeah, this is the problem. I actually expressed this sometime earlier. We were watching, I don't remember what we were watching, one of the films, one of the TV shows, whatever. The films and the TV shows, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, are now getting to the actual comics problem, which is at some point your world becomes too large and too complex, and you start to turn off the audience. And you can't bring in new audience members because they don't know what's going on. They're not caught up with all
You
the
don't have
stuff
25 years of history of the X-Men to understand the,
right,
you know,
like up to this point. And this is
that's why they're rebooted all the time.
Right, exactly. That's why every so often you see, like, there's some big reboot. DC and Marvel both do this, and they say everything that came before this didn't happen, and we'll start here. This is issue 1 again, and then you can, you know, come in as a like fresh, and you don't need to know all this other stuff. And I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in their quest to just, you know, keep getting bigger and bigger, is now reaching this unwieldy tipping point where they're going to start turning people off. And you might say, well, there's a core that will always come back. And that's true. There is a core that will always come back, because there's a core that always comes back.
You're not getting the new people. I can't commit to 26 movies in order to know what's going on, who that person is.
Right. There's a core that always comes back for comics, but that's not enough to sustain comics, right? They need new people to come in. They need people who are only peripherally interested to come in, and that's what they need for the films. Now, I'm going to use my parents as an example, because my parents watch a lot of these films, but they're not like caught up in all the lore and whatever. And my mom's always like, you know, saying to me or my son or whatever, explain this to me, like about this thing or whatever. So they just watched Loki, and my mom was like, I didn't really get it. You know, she didn't understand like the significance of it. I was like, well, Kang the Conqueror is being set up as this
that's just it, right?
And all this stuff. And she's like, oh, I guess I have to watch it again, you know. And it's like, you're going to ask a woman who's going to be 70 years old,
right,
to watch this stuff all over again so that she can go out to the theater on a Sunday with her husband and, you know, take in what she thinks is a fun matinee. You know what I mean? Like, you just can't ask audiences at some point to take in all this information. And the Eternals, unfortunately for this film, represents now everything that's, I think, is going to be wrong with the MCU going forward. You know, you're asking people to keep track of all these characters, all these different types of people, Celestials, Eternals, Deviants, whatever. There's going to be multiverses. There's going to be all
the multiverses.
Yeah.
But even the Eternals comic as a kid, like, was nothing that I had any interest in whatsoever.
No.
You know, I mean, I get it. Jack Kirby, you know, he was obsessed with Chariots of the Gods and the idea of, you know, ancient alien, you know, astronauts that were coming down. And in its core, it's great. But yeah, it's a lot to take in. And seeing my wife walk out of the theater going, I didn't get it.
Right.
I didn't get it. And it's like, and it's disappointing, the first time she goes back to the theater since probably Pirates of the Caribbean 2. And she's like, I'm like, this is the worst movie you could have chosen. You should have come with me last week.
But Christina, you're talking about the core audience. I would consider us being the core audience, and none of us liked it. So I think that's a problem.
It was very disappointing. I mean, and listen, I know that there's people out there that love this and are arguing, and knock your socks off. It just didn't. I'm completely indifferent to it. It did nothing.
There are things, to Christina's point, this has great actors in it. And I think that there are individually
the
great
cast
performances.
Is just...
Angelina Jolie is great as Thena. But again, it's just they're fractures of characters. You don't really get a full sense of who any of them are, and hence you don't really feel for them.
No, you're not connected in any way. You don't care if they win or lose.
And it's almost fitting that they are almost robots, really. What they figure out that they've been programmed and invented in a lab somewhere. So it's almost fitting. And there's individual things, like I said, that I like. Festos, I loved his character and the family that he built and what they were trying to do there. I liked some of the battle scenes. And I say it's on the bottom of my MCU list. And I'll still say that even though it's at the bottom, I love these MCU movies so much, it's still going to be better than a lot of the other movies that I see. But it didn't hold a candle to some of the other highs of the MCU.
Again, even with all of the characters and they're trying to establish all this stuff, Makari is almost completely forgotten as a character. You really don't see her except in like a few scenes in the flashbacks. And then like all of a sudden in the present, she's on the ship. There was just too much to do, I think, in the end. This definitely, I think, would have been better served if they tried to break it into two and made it a tighter film instead of trying to cram everything into one big film. But then I also understand, again, they're trying to set up this next phase. They're trying to do again, like all this lifting for these other movies, and they're on a schedule and they have other characters to establish. They have to make a Black Knight movie. They have to make a Blade movie, apparently.
Apparently. Well, you got Morbius coming.
There's just too much.
And Disney just dropped the other day. There's, they've got like 10 new shows, TV shows.
Right. And then they're asking you as a viewer, not to pick and choose what you want. Like when you went to the comic store, you'd be like, I like Batman and I like Green Arrow.
Yeah.
Maybe once a year there was a crossover event where these characters showed up, because that always happened in the comic books too, which is, here comes Galactus and he's going to destroy the Earth, and it's up to the Fantastic Four to deal with it. Where are all the other superheroes in New York? Why are they not a part of this? So it does fit in with the comic book lore that you can only do so much. This might have been better served as like a miniseries or something more along the line of The Boys or something, or even like The Watchmen, which unfortunately got canceled after the first season, where you can kind of delve into these characters and get to know them a little bit more. One episode or whatever devoted to there was a lot going on. And then even like you said, the end credit with Black Knight. Like we all knew he was cast as a Black Knight, so you're waiting, and he even makes a reference. He's like, "Oh, well, my family history is convoluted or complicated," and you're like, "What does that mean?" And there's no payoff. It's like, well, stay tuned, kids. You might find out who he is. The Star Fox shows up, Harry Styles. That little Pippin was like the worst CG character I've seen on screen in a very long time.
So now Jeff, you may have some explanation of this. He's supposed to be a Celestial and Thanos' brother.
He is actually Thanos' brother or half brother or something.
No, not a Celestial.
No, a deviant.
Not a deviant, an Eternal. I'm talking about Eros, not Thanos.
Okay.
But how is he an Eternal? If he's Thanos' if Thanos is a deviant, then maybe it does all make sense if they're both.
Yeah, I don't remember him being in the comics. So Star Fox is an Avenger at one point in the 80s. And he was a fun character. He's Eros. He's a ladies' man, whatever. It was kind of funny that they got Harry Styles. Although, is he going to play this character again? Is he even going to show up? I don't know. But yeah, I don't remember him being in the comics. I don't remember him being connected to Thanos in any way. But
we haven't talked about the reference twice to DC characters in this movie.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting. Batman and Superman.
So
right?
Batman, Superman exist in the canon, not as real characters, but as fictional characters in the MCU, which is very significant, but it seems like it was a throwaway thing that they added it here. It's not like that they're trying to build a crossover between universes or anything. It's just that because of the mythology that we'll talk some more about during our second feature, the hero mythology, they felt that it was appropriate to bring in some fictional characters as well as these characters that are real to the MCU. So hence the reference to Batman and Alfred and Superman.
I saw in the end credits that they gave credit to The Empire Strikes Back, and I'm like, I don't remember them making a reference. Is that where I fell asleep? That there was a Star Wars reference?
Oh, there was a Star Wars comic that Icarus picks up, or a coloring book or something, when they go to visit.
Apparently, I missed
Fastos.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, I might have rested my eyes around that time. Okay,
so
fair enough.
What would we say? What is our final verdict out of 5 buckets? What would we give Eternals?
Very disappointing. I'll give it 3 just because it's a Marvel movie.
Yeah, I was there. I was mildly entertained. I was disappointed, but I'd give it 3. I didn't hate it, didn't love it. It's right in the middle.
Yeah, it sucks when you're indifferent to it.
I'm right there with you. I also say it's a 3, and I'm mostly giving it credit for the great cast, and there's a lot of potential in this film wasn't fulfilled, and my streak this month continues of films I have not loved.
That you've just not
it's
been
like
happy
5
with.
weeks in a row.
Like, come on, people. We've waited so long to get back into theater. Stop giving us drivel.
I just want to go to the movies and love something. I just want to be, on this show. The last time I was super enthusiastic about a new release was Prisoners of the Ghostland. Think about it, guys. Think of all the movies we've watched.
I try not to think too much about that, to be honest with you.
But no, I agree. And this upcoming second feature that we're going to cover in a few minutes is case in point. I find that I've always been chasing the dragon from when I was a kid and getting really excited and loving movies in the theater. And maybe it's just because you get older, you don't have that same feeling anymore. But it's very rare that a movie will take me back to that feeling of being a kid, that sense of Spielbergian wonderment that you get from watching a new movie. So I'm always looking for that feeling. And very rarely do I get it, very rarely. So let us leave the MCU until the next time. And we're going to go to the concession stand. We'll be right back with the 1981 Clash of the Titans.
This drive-in theater is radioactive. Now you can hear tonight's show on your AM car radio. Turn your ignition key to the accessory position. This will not drain your car battery. Now turn on your radio and zero in on the following AM station.
Men, there's a drive-in movie full of juicy people. Wow! It's a trap! Help! It's Pick! We've had it, men.
A pleasant aroma for you, but not for mosquitoes. Pick is easy to use. Light it and forget it. Pick's aroma keeps mosquitoes, gnats, and sandflies away. Pick is the best protection for barbecues, fishing and camping trips, or just relaxing in the yard.
So if you don't want our company ever anywhere, just light Pick and see what I mean? Bye!
Pick is on sale at the refreshment stand now.
Okay, we are back, and we are talking Clash of the Titans. Now, this was a hugely important movie for me and all of my friends back in 1981, released in the summer of that year, right in the middle of the early 80s, late 70s heyday of blockbusters that you were getting each and every year. This was released on the same day as Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's crazy. That is pretty impressive. Not only that, there's an actor who was in both of those movies, so he had the #1 and #2 movie at the same time.
Really? Who
yeah,
is it?
Pat Roach, who plays the bald mechanic that fights Indy under the flying wing plane.
And he's Fastos.
He's also in this movie. Yeah, he was one of the guys with Zeus there, big tall guy.
Well, is he the guy that isn't Pat Roach the guy that makes Bubo?
That's
Yes.
Festus.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Fastos and the Eternals,
Is the same.
kind of a loose equivalent to that character from that we saw here in Clash of the
Maybe
Titans.
we needed more Bubo in.
He's very good with his
Eternals.
hands, apparently. Very good with his hands. But Clash of the Titans, 1981. I remember seeing this at the drive-in several times, going back with various friends. So when I watch this now, I hear that echo from the drive-in speaker.
Yeah, the
on
little
your
speaker.
Yeah, I can still hear that.
That was
echo.
before you could actually tune into your radio station.
Yes, it
right?
was. Yes,
Yeah.
it was. You both must have seen this in the theater. Am I?
I don't think I did see this in the theater. No,
No?
I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark in the theater. That was like we went to the drive-in, but I probably saw this on HBO.
Really?
Yeah.
How about you, Christina?
Well, I know I talked about this before. So like at the age we are now, our age difference doesn't matter, but in 1981 it did.
It
I was
did.
only 7.
Yeah,
So,
but
no,
still, you would go to the movies, right?
yeah, I did,
as a
but my mom-
7-year-old,
But at that age, my mom only took us to like Disney movies.
because you
and
were the
my-
oldest, and you had
and-
younger siblings.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we had actually in 1981, my last sibling was born. So
In the
so
theater.
I don't think my mom was taking us to the movies that year. I remember seeing this on HBO. I remember we had a VCR pretty early, so my mom was crazy about
Yeah, you said
recording
that she
things.
recorded everything, which is great. That's genius.
So we, I know I watched this more than one time, on a recorded, tape from HBO. Whenever it finally made it to HBO, but my memory of it is that it was a little later, than that, a couple years later, maybe. For a lot of kids, this was like their first exposure to Greek myths, which I think is really interesting. Because I remember seeing this, and then because I was that kind of kid, I went and got a book about Greek myths, and then I read.
And then you're like, wait a minute, none of this
right,
is true.
right, and then you're like, wait, this
Line
is
up
all
at
wrong.
all. Yeah.
It's interesting because for kids now, it's Percy Jackson.
Oh,
And
yeah. Okay.
my son got really into the Percy Jackson books. He was sort of just
Sky
the
did as
right
well,
age.
yeah.
And he then went out and same thing, bought all these books about Greek myths and like wanted to know all these things about the real Greek myths. And, I remember we went when he was in that Greek myth phase, we watched Jason and the Argonauts. I think that sort of beyond its inherent qualities, I think this film is actually a launching point for a lot of kids, like to at that time, to maybe find out more about Greek mythology or about mythology in general.
The characterizations of a lot of these myths are iconic in this movie. The Harryhausen special effects, and this is somebody coming from somebody like me who was primed from watching all these Sinbad movies on TV. The infamous skeleton sword scene. So I knew all that going into Clash of the Titans, and I was looking forward to seeing Harryhausen. Unfortunately, this was kind of his last hurrah.
This was his last.
Because he retired after this, even though he was a producer on this. He wasn't just the special effects guy. So he was very much behind the scenes. But yeah, I don't know if it was just he was getting older or if like the industry was kind of, changing.
Yeah.
I read some stuff about this film. What he said was that special effects had really changed a lot. Star Wars had come out at this point, Superman had come out at this point, and there was a sense that even as well done as they are, the stop motion effects were sort of quaint looking compared to the innovations that they were, even though this was still the era of physical effects. The innovations that were being made on sets to make things look more realistic. There was this sense that there wasn't really the same place for these sort of stop motion effects that there had been in the past. And Harryhausen felt a little disillusioned. There was a Variety review that was particularly cruel to the film. And he said after he's read that, he was just crushed.
I read that review.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of time that it's a lost art form, but you think it was another 10 years before Jurassic Park really changed everything. So the stop motion was still, listen, it's quaint, but it's exactly what's needed in this movie.
It was a sense at the time that
it
was quaint. I'm not saying I think it's quaint. I'm saying that there was a sense from critics, like, look at this.
What else were you going to do? I mean,
look at this cute guy over here with his little clay models.
Yeah.
And I think in particular, I think that the Medusa sequence is very well done, and it actually benefits from being in shadow. So
Yes.
you have you're not trying to light a character like in broad daylight, which is when a lot of them tend to look a little more fake. But I think the Medusa sequence, first of all, it's a very suspenseful scene, the way it's drawn out, but also,
it's to me, it's the highlight of the movie is the Medusa scene.
but she also looks a little more realistic because she's in shadow and you're not she seems like she integrates better with the background than some of the other characters do.
The effect of the close-up of her face, whatever drawbacks the stop motion might have, are not revealed in any of these close-ups.
No, and that's interesting because Calibos, full figured, is animated, but up close they used an actor and done the same thing with the Medusa, but they didn't. This is Harryhausen acting this entire time, with her facial expressions and whatever. And I can't say enough good things about this movie. This is one of those movies that just takes you back to being like 12 years old.
I mean, the other great thing about Medusa, I think, is that as a stop motion character, she has a personality. She does,
because you get her backstory from the Stygian witches, so you can sense her anger.
Oh yeah. Like she's an angry, and she's rightfully so, by the way. Rightfully so, because by the way, in the real story, she was not quote unquote seduced. She was forced. So she was raped in the temple, and for this, she was punished by Aphrodite. As usual, the guy gets off, the girl pays the price. She's furious. And you can see that, there's guys coming into her temple. She's like, just get out, man. Just leave me alone.
I'm washing my hair today.
So what were these other guys trying to do? I wonder, that were trying to get into her temple. Does she have a treasure or something that?
But I think it's great because Harryhausen really gives her a lot of personality. So she's not just like sort of a cool looking stop motion character. She's a character that has personality and she has motivation and she's acting according to those things. And it is such a great sequence. It's very, very memorable.
And I just want to mention the Calibos. We were talking before how it's half practical of an actor in makeup and for the close-ups, and then half stop motion when he's fully figured, probably because of the tail that he's got. But I just was picturing the actor, because you never see his lower half, probably wearing sweatpants like during his scene.
Yeah. I love that character. I actually had his action figure there.
I did too. I did too.
That character.
I actually think about how difficult it must have been for him because makeup techniques have improved a lot since then. Look at this extreme prosthetic he's wearing on his face.
It still holds up. It's very impressive.
And I just think about the hours he must have spent in the makeup chair.
Yeah, but he was still able to emote, and he was still able to, because originally that character didn't even have a line of dialogue.
Well, originally in mythology, that character doesn't even exist.
No, I know. Well, neither does Bubo. You gonna tell me Bubo? Bubo was just there as a cash grab for the R2D2 fans of the universe.
It's actually sort of interesting to me because in the mythology, Thetis is not a goddess as she's portrayed here. She's played by Maggie Smith. She's a nereid. She's a sea nymph, and she did not marry Poseidon. She married a human, but she does in fact have a famous son. Some guy named Achilles. Yeah, that's her son.
Yeah, well, you should have dipped them all the way in that water.
Supposedly, there's various versions of the story, but there's a couple of versions that say that she was interrupted, which is why she didn't get his heel, or that was where she was holding him and she dipped him in the sticks and things like that. But yeah, it's sort of interesting to me that she's actually quite a significant character in Greek mythology. And then they sort of pulled her out and put her in this.
They did. He did kind of interact. He just pulled these characters at whim.
I like the fact that Zeus has action figures that he plays with.
Yes. Yeah.
Setting up for the marketing for this film, I'm sure. And I just would like to point out, for being somebody that's in charge of all the seas and waters of the world, Poseidon looks very uncomfortable when he's underwater.
Yeah, no.
He's just.
Well, Poseidon is actually. I've always found this interesting, especially again, like once I had read the Greek myths and sort of learned about the real story behind them. Zeus is actually the baby brother. He is the youngest of all of his siblings. Poseidon is the middle brother. He's the middle child, and Hades is the oldest.
That's why he retreated to the ocean. He's like, I'm out of here, middle child.
And his little brother's out there bossing him around. Go release the Kraken.
Go release the Kraken. Now listen, yeah, Zeus was a jerk though. He's like, I'm just gonna mutate this guy. We'll turn him into a monster.
No, and his biggest jerk moment was when he makes what was her name? The goddess with Bubo.
Athena.
Athena.
Yeah.
Give him Bubo. That is my wish. I command it. I
That's
command
my
it.
owl. I don't want no.
Never.
Well, and Athena is actually his child. She was born, she spreaded from his head. She was in
Some
mythology.
freaky crap going on with these Greek gods. On
So
Olympus. What is going on up there?
She's actually his daughter, and she's like, no, Dad. Nope.
No.
Like,
My owl. Go make your own owl. Get that
And
guy to make your owl.
she's very lucky that Hephaestus is awesome and can make anything. Hephaestus, one of the most wronged characters in Greek mythology, and that's saying a lot because a lot of people have just unfair ends in Greek mythology. Interestingly, Perseus is not one of them, which is if you've read Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series, in the book, the character Percy Jackson, his name is Perseus. He's Perseus's nickname. His mother named him Perseus because Perseus was the only hero in Greek mythology who actually had a happy ending. Because all of the heroes, go through terrible things, or they end up like it starts off okay and then it ends badly.
They don't call them a Greek tragedy for nothing.
And this partially reflects the fact that the Greeks fundamentally viewed the world as like unfair and random. Basically, they didn't believe that like there was luck, or that you could make your own luck, or that you could achieve things and like get get good things. They just believed that life was random and unfair, and their mythology reflects that to a very large extent. But Perseus is the only hero who has a straight up happy ending. He gets the girl, he gets the kingdom. Nothing bad happens to him. No curse rebounds on him. Nothing.
What would have happened if Medusa died with her eyes closed? Story would have been over.
Go there, like,
He's like, hold on, I got. Oh!
Why didn't all those onlookers at the end also turn to stone?
Because
they were, yeah.
He was very careful to face away from the cliff, right?
Actually, I really love that shot, that practical head that is like soaked with seawater that he holds up and then holds it up to the Kraken. Now, I would just like to say to my friend Kevin Morrison back in 1981, I have been jealous of him all these years because he had the full-sized Kraken.
Oh, that was great. That was huge.
It was huge. It was huge.
And it was cool because you actually saw his bottom, which you never really saw in the movie. I mean, you saw the one tail, as it comes out of the gate or whatever. But yeah, it was a physical. That thing was probably like 2 foot tall. Right?
It was because it had to be in
scale.
It had to be in correct proportion to the little action figures. So yeah, it was. Yeah. It was very impressive.
Yeah, listen, for a 40-year-old movie, there's some of the effects are kind of wonky, but it still holds up. You just go along for the ride.
I mean, they do a lot just to try to do as much as they can to establish like suspense and atmosphere, sometimes without the effects. The Stygian witches are a great example of this. It's sort of interesting. I literally just 2 weeks ago, I was asked to write the introduction for a Baba Yaga anthology. And I was thinking about this as I was watching the movie and the Stygian witches. There's really something to this idea that wise women are dangerous women.
You're just going to that conclusion now.
But also they have to be, mythology warned women away from knowledge by making these wise women who are also dangerous. They're also ugly, right? They're hideous, they're grotesque.
Look away.
And they have to live far away from everybody. They're isolated from society because, you know, women who know things are clearly not to be trusted. And there's no way that a smart woman could also be beautiful, you know. So it's so interesting to me the way when you look at different mythologies, when you look at Baba Yaga, which comes from Eastern European roots, and then you look at something like this, you know, which is, you know, a Mediterranean root, and then you see that like these themes pervade over and over and over again, and how misogyny is literally built into the folktales of these cultures. You know, one of the things about Andromeda in the film, she's largely passive character, you know, and when bad things happen to her, it's like she just shuts down emotionally, right? She doesn't even like speak or shed a tear or express any emotion of any kind as she's, you know, being led out to the rock where she's going to be chained and eaten by the Kraken.
Yeah, she's kind of like, all right, well, this is my lot.
But there are a couple of scenes when she's not under Calabas's curse and when she's not, you know, under Thaddeus's curse at the end, where she really, you know, you see her express her agency. Like, I say I'm coming with you. You know, you can't leave me behind. I'm, you know, there's no queen here and I command, not you. So it's actually kind of nice to see her do that. But, you know, in a lot of senses, there's just not a lot to that character. I mean, there's not a lot to the character in the myth either, but you know, it was kind of nice to see her out there trying to express herself. But other than Andromeda, who's a largely passive character, all of the women in the film are portrayed as devious in some way, right? Thetis, the Stygian witches, Medusa, bad and dangerous.
The casting of Harry Hamlin wouldn't have been if Orion had distributed the picture. They wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I saw that.
This is
There's no way he could have handled that dialogue.
This is pre-Conan, by the way, pre-Conan. So
well,
he wasn't even there yet at that point in his acting career.
Hercules in New York level.
Yeah.
Acting.
Oh, that was a great movie.
And Harry Hamlin and Ursula Andress were a couple at the time of filming.
I did see that he fought because we talk about that iconic scene with Medusa, and that originally in the script he was supposed to throw the shield, and he was adamant that he take her head off with the sword, and got in a fight and actually stormed off set and locked himself in his trailer.
What, he was supposed to behead her with the shield?
Yeah, he was supposed to just throw the shield and behead her that way. And he stood his ground. And then that very iconic shot where he comes out of the temple and actually lifts her head up, like he shot, like they didn't want that either. And he shot that with like the second unit camera guy that just happened to be standing. He goes, oh, hold on, stay right there. I'm going to do this. And thankfully they used it in the movie, because I think they used it in every promo.
Yeah, they did.
You know, but yeah, I guess he felt very adamant about this whole sword versus the shield thing. So way to stand your ground, my friend. Sequel, 1984. It was supposed to be called Force of the Trojans, but it never happened.
Oh,
well, Harryhausen had really lost his mojo at that point, right? He was not ready to do another one of these films.
Yeah, well, you know, as Jim mentioned before, he was producer as well as, you know, animator on this. So it still boggles my mind that this came out the same day as Rare So Long.
It does.
It's pretty wild because they're two very iconic movies. So.
Critics seem to be split over this. Both Siskel and Ebert loved this.
3.5 stars each. Yeah, out of 4.
Time magazine said the real Titan is Ray Harryhausen.
Oh, that goes without saying.
But then we get that variety that
you saw the variety.
mentioned.
That's horrible.
An unbearable bore of a film. An endless array of flat, outdated special effects. Just a knife into the gut, I'm sure, reading that.
But then again, I mean, what did you really have? Like, how else were you going to realize these characters? I mean, CG wasn't even a thing then. So you're going to put people in full costumes?
It almost seems fitting. Talking about Sinbad and these other, you know, movies, it's like the mythos of these characters almost at that time period begged for stop motion.
Yeah,
I think it's extremely fitting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. As a matter of fact, when I was in high school, one of my English reports on Greek mythology, I created a comic book with, you know, the characters, Charybdis and all these, you know, the Cyclops and all these other creatures that are just so otherworldly that just, you know, that's the realm they live in. Yeah, I couldn't see these guys any other way now.
Well, it's interesting because I think at that point, you know, while there were some, you know, fantasy type films that tried to do like puppets and things like that for these types of characters, a lot of times when you had films that had fantasy elements in this, like this many fantasy elements, it would just be made as an animated film. You know, they wouldn't even try to make it as a live action because there was a sense that you couldn't do it realistically.
Yeah.
So he was still out there trying to make something that was, you know, that looked as realistic as he could make it. And there are quite a lot of stop motion characters.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you think of the, you know, the two-headed Cerberus and you know, the Kraken, you know, we talk even Pegasus.
The scorpions, right?
Scorpions.
It just doesn't stop giving. This movie.
No, although that animated seagull in the opening credits is just the worst thing ever.
That is terrible. It probably those two in the coffin would be long dead by the time it took that seagull to get all the way up.
All of a sudden it's like snowing. I'm like, where is he going?
But there is one really funny line. I had to note it. Andromeda says to Perseus, "We just met today, but you said you'd love me much longer." "Yes, yesterday." when I snuck into your bedroom.
Yeah.
At least it's been 24 hours.
Yeah. And meanwhile, they were sacrificing her because she was a virgin. But after they got married, all he had to do was seal the deal, and that would have been not an issue. But apparently, he had better things to do.
Well, Thetis would have destroyed the city then.
That is true.
That was the whole threat.
That was the deal. That was the deal.
That always freaked me out that the statue had fallen and then she's talking, and I'm just like, it's kind of.
And does nobody else hear that vulture coming every night?
Was that Eon? That was that Eon from Rudolph Shiny New Year, by the way. Who's ears?
How many buckets would we give to Clash of the Titans?
Oh, I give it 4. I gave it a solid 4.
Yeah, I feel like affection plays a lot into this rating, but also a 4.
We're on the same page this week. 4 buckets.
Yeah, there you go. It's an extra half bucket just because there's no Harry Styles in it.
All right, so next week is our big annual Monster Fest Thanksgiving episode.
It's our 4th annual.
Our 4th annual.
We're out of movies after this.
And I don't know if she remembers, but a year ago, this was Christina's brainchild. Pair up Son of Godzilla with Son of Kong.
This was my idea?
This was your idea.
Can
we go back to that episode? Oh no, it probably wasn't.
I don't remember that this was my idea.
No, it was. And I remember because I remember on that episode, I said, that is a brilliant pairing. And I commended you for that. Maybe I'll have a different attitude when we talk about these next week. But
I guess you're going to have to wait till next week. That's pretty funny.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Yes, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIConfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you. Apparently.
Apparently.